Hey guys, what's up? It's me, Samslow33 here, and welcome to the show about Pokemon TCG stuff, mix-up, and today we're going to take a look at the Furious Fist set. Even though it came out over a month ago, there are still a lot of really cool cards I'd like to talk about. I'm actually really impressed with this set, to be honest. There's a lot of really cool new archetypes, as well as a lot of cards for fun decks, and even some new trainers as well. And combined with all this, the rotation happened earlier this month, so the metagame's definitely going to be changed from how it used to be. So I'm really excited for that. I think this format is really going to be interesting with this cool set, as well as the rotation, which was probably a rotation for the better. You know, we got rid of Dark Patch and, I don't know, some other lame cards I don't care about. Oh yeah, the rotation is boundaries crossed on, so yeah. So, let's get on to the set review right now.
With this set being Furious Fist, we might as well talk about the fighting stuff in this set first. And let me tell you, this fighting stuff is legit. The first thing that makes fighting legit is strong energy. It's an energy that can only be attached to fighting Pokemon, but that Pokemon does 20 more damage. Holy hell, what has Power Creep done to this card? 20 damage? For an energy? To give you an idea of how legit that is, look at the Darkness energy that used to exist. That only added 10 damage. This adds 20. Getting the effect of Muscle Band and a fighting energy in one card is just ridiculous. Then you remember you can also put Muscle Band on that Pokemon too. Then you try to remember why you're even playing this game anymore. Oh look, there's even more cards in this set that add damage to fighting types. Fun! The next legit card in this long line of legit cards in the set is Fighting Stadium. This stadium makes fighting Pokemon do 20 more damage to EXs. After reading that, this card is most definitely legit. That's 3 cards now that add 20 damage to fighting Pokemon. Just imagine Landorus EX with all that support. Too bad it's being rotated. Never mind, it's boundaries crossed on. We're screwed. Good thing there's equally powerful and stupid fighting types in this set too. Oh, guys, check this out. They even have a great consistency supporter too. That card would be Karina. It lets you search for a fighting Pokemon and an item. I have to admit, that's some legit support right there, I tell you what. As long as you build your list around it, Karina can be just as versatile as Skyla, while also getting you a fighting Pokemon. You barely even need to play Ultra Ball with 4 Karina in your deck. This card just rounds out the incredible fighting support to make any fighting deck ridiculously legit. Now that we've talked about all the support fighting gets in this set, we've got to talk about the fighting Pokemon to go along with them. The first, and best, is Lucario EX. And I must say, out of all the Pokemon in this set, if I had to pick one that was the most legit, I would, without a doubt, have to pick Lucario EX. It's got 3 attacks, not something that Pokemon has done in a long time. The first does 30 and isn't affected by resistance. Pretty decent attack for 1 energy. The second does 60 for 2, and you draw until you have 6 cards in your hand. This attack is what makes this card as legit as it is. Having a main attacker that also draws you cards is something unheard of in the XY era, or even Black and White era, especially on a basic EX that does a pretty decent amount of damage. Its third attack does 100 for 3, which is a nice finisher attack, since you can actually deal 180 damage with enough strong energy, a muscle band, and a fighting stadium. Overall, Lucario is a very fast, legit, and versatile card with quite a bit of power and speed behind it to boot. Lucario also has a Mega in this set, but similar to Charizard, the Mega can't live up to the legitness of the original. Its attack does 140 for 3, and you discard an energy attached to the defending Pokemon. It's hard to get 3 energy on a Lucario in the first place, and regular Lucario can most of the time knock things out in 1 hit for the same amount of energy. The secondary effect is basically useless, since you should always be knocking everything out in 1 hit. In a fighting deck, getting 3 energy on something is usually a giant waste of time, especially if you have to skip a turn as well. It also dies in 1 hit to Mewtwo and Deoxys, so most decks can even kill it in 1 hit. M. Lucario is fairly underwhelming. You could have gotten so many knockouts in the time it took to power up an M. Lucario. In my opinion, not one of the more legit cards in this set. Speaking of legitness, this next card is most definitely legit. That card is Landorus. Definitely a legit card. He's got an attack for 1 energy that does 20, and you attach a basic energy from your discard to one of your bench Pokemon. Very legit attack right there. It's similar to Thundurus EX and Yveltal, and just as good. Both Lucario EX and Landorus EX have very costly alternate attacks, which are incredibly hard to power up. But Landorus easily powers them up for late game sweeps. It even sets up knockouts with your low energy attacks, since it does damage too. With all the fighting damage modifiers, of course. Considering fighting's weak late game, Landorus is a great card to help improve it. And the final staple fighting attacker for our totally legit fighting deck is Hawlucha. And while a lot of people don't realize how strong this card is, I certainly realize this card's inner, most righteous legitness. Its attack does 60 for 1 energy. Wow, that's quite the high damage to energy ratio. And that's before you add all the damage boosting from the fighting support. The drawback is it only hits EX Pokemon. Its ability also adds a drawback, which says ignore weakness and resistance when using this attack. While both of these drawbacks can be annoying, you'll be running 50 other fighting Pokemon along with it, so you can just use those guys when your opponent is using something that's weak to fighting or a non-EX. It also has free retreat, so it doesn't even get in the way when you're facing something that Hawlucha isn't optimal against. Honestly, Hawlucha is a really strong, really legit card that's great for any fighting deck. And did I mention how legit it is? Well, in case I didn't, it's legit. And that rounds out the legit collection of fighting cards in this set. Hope you enjoyed my overuse of the word legit. Don't worry for those who loved it. I'll be using it again later on in this video. Time to move on to some of the lesser cards in this set. There aren't too many outstanding Pokemon in this set, but there are a lot of okay ones. The first is the pair of Magmortar and Electivire. These guys seem like a pretty fun combo. Magmortar's first attack is decent. It does 30 for 1 fire, and you search your deck for a fire energy and attach it to Magmortar. The second attack, however, is one heck of a monster. It costs 1 fire and 3 colorless, and does 80, but it does an extra 80 if you have Electivire on your bench. Holy jeez! 160 for 4 is much better than the average. Of course, Muscle Band allows you to easily deal 180 damage and knock out anything in your path. Electivire is a nice fill-in attacker for those turns you can't get a Magmortar rolling. For 1 lightning, it does 20 plus 20 for each energy attached to all of your Magmortar in play. Most of the time, that can do 60, 80, or 100 damage with Muscle Band, which can get you a 2-shot on pretty much anything. With such large energy requirements, you're gonna need to use something like Milotic, Victini EX, or Blacksmith to power up your Magmortars, which aren't bad forms of energy acceleration in the slightest. With some very nice types going for them, I could see this combo being fairly strong. It probably won't win any regionals, but it might be a fun deck that can give you some entertainment at a League Challenge. Speaking of League Challenge decks, our next card is another group of cards. The center of all these Pokemon is Politoed. Its ability allows you to ignore all the cardless energy in the attack costs of your Poliwrath, Poliwhirl, and Poliwag. This ability sounds good, but of course, it all depends on what attacks those Pokemon have. So let's check them out. Poliwrath has Steamroll for CCC, which does 60 and 30 to one of your opponent's bench Pokemon. With that energy cost, Politoed makes the energy cost 0. 60 and 30 for 0 is definitely not bad, but maybe not worth setting up 2 stage 2s. Poliwrath's second attack is often overlooked, but it seems pretty solid to me. Submission does 130 for WWCC, and you take 30 damage. 130 damage for WW is another pretty solid energy requirement, and the drawback isn't that bad either. Poliwhirl and Poliwag thankfully take great advantage of Politoed's ability too. You can either use Celebi to have Poliwrath use the attacks, or just use Poliwhirl and Wag by themselves. Poliwhirl does 50 for CCC, but if the defending Pokemon has any damage counters on them, the attack does 60 more. Another solid attack to finish things off that have already been hit by Steamroll. Poliwag has Spiral Current for CCC, which does 20, and the defending Pokemon can't retreat, and it's confused. It can be a decent attack in tight spots, and is something nice to use when you just have a Poliwag out and no Poliwrath or Whirl. Overall, this Poly deck has a very nice arsenal of attacks it can use. The only issue is that Stage 2s have lost a lot of power with the rotation. No Level Ball, and no Tropical Beach. That's pretty painful. If you can actually set up your field, you can abuse stuff like Max Potion and the new Training Center, and you have plenty of room to play all kinds of crazy stuff. This deck's probably not that competitive. At best, interesting, but not really competitive. But there's more to Pokemon than just League challenges. It's time to talk about something legitimately good. Next up is Beartic. At first glance, this card looks like your standard junk rare, but surprisingly, it actually beats a lot of stuff in this format. Its attack, Igloo Hold, does 20 for 2 Carless, and 20 more for each energy in the defending Pokemon's retreat cost. Just looking at the things weak to water in this format, everything starts to click. After Muscle Band, it does 200 to Landorus EX, 160 to Pyroar, and 120 to regular Landorus. That's 3 really prominent Pokemon that Beartic kills in one hit. The biggest of the 3 being Pyroar, which is not an easy card to counter. Combine that with its 130 HP, it's a really solid card against those decks. Virgin in particular has a lot of trouble with those cards, but really anything can afford Beartic's CC energy cost. I definitely see Beartic being one of the best tech cards coming into regionals. Our next card is another group of cards. Yes, another one. This time starting with a trainer, Fossil Researcher. Fossil Researcher is a supporter that lets you search your deck for a combination of any 2 Amora or Tyrunt and put them on your bench. Man, compared to the past Fossil support, this is really good. Getting 2 of them on your bench for just a supporter is so much easier than flipping heads on Twist Mountain or getting lucky on the Fossil items. Well, now we've got to look at Aurorus and Tyrantrum to see if they're worth playing an entire supporter to set up. First, let's look at Aurorus. Its ability says that each of your water Pokemon with water energy on them get all damage done to them reduced by 20. With this ability stacked, you can get some very sick defense out of these guys. You automatically get a second Amora out when you get the first one, so it shouldn't even be that hard to set up a second one. And you only need to play down 2 Fossil Researcher to get all of your Amora out. Imagine the new Seismitoad EX with 4 Aurorus in play and a Hard Charm on it. Its 3 retreat cost and its weakness to Garbodor are the only things holding this card back, which sadly are pretty steep drawbacks. Time to look at the second fossil, Tyrantrum. It's got 150 HP, very nice for a fossil stage 1. And for 1 fighting and 2 Carless, it has Chew Up, which does 60 plus 90 if the defending Pokemon has a special energy attached. Yeesh, that's a lot of damage for FCC. You can easily just one-shot EXs with Fighting Stadium, Strong Energy, or Muscle Band. The big issue here is if your opponent sees you're playing Tyrantrum, they can easily just not attach special energy to their Pokemon, and Tyrantrum only does 60 damage. Not quite the powerhouse you thought it was, now was it? To counteract this, Tyrantrum's second attack does 150 for an extra fighting, but you can't attack next turn. Again, it should one-shot everything with Fighting Stadium, Strong Energy, or Muscle Band, but the energy requirement is a bit too steep for my tastes. I think Tyrantrum needs a good partner to really be successful. Maybe regular Landorus? Tyrantrum does do really solid damage though, which may be enough to make it pretty playable. Alright, we're finally done with those groups of cards. Our next card is Dedenne. Or is it Dedenne? Dende? I'll just call it D. D's first attack is Emolga's Call for Family, which is nice, but that's not the reason it's playable. D's got a very nice second attack in the form of Energy Short, which for 1 Carless does 20 damage times the amount of energy attached to the defending Pokemon. Wow, that is good for 1 Carless. It does ridiculously high amounts of damage to Yveltal VX. If they have 3 energy on their Yveltal, and D has a Silver Bangle, that's a one-hit KO! How long have we been waiting for a basic Pokemon that can counter Yveltal? Man, this card is going to be so good! Oh wait, Yveltal just got a lot worse after losing Dark Patch. It would have been nice to have D while Yveltal was playable, but I guess it's nice to have in case Yveltal gets good again. At least D will be popular in Extended, where Yveltal will definitely see play. Next up is Hypno. This is by far the weirdest card in this set, which is just the reason we're talking about it. Its attack is called Hand Control. For one Psychic, you look at your opponent's hand and force them to play a supporter in their hand. But you make all the decisions for the card, if it requires decision making. This card is only good just because of how many hilarious possibilities it opens up. You can Juniper their hand of useful resources. You can End or Chorus them to a low hand size. You can Skyla or Karina and search their deck and see what cards they're playing. You don't even have to choose one of their supporters if you don't want to. So you can avoid those awkward spots where you make your opponent draw more cards when you don't want them to. There have been some pretty funny bad deck ideas in this video, but Hypno I think takes the cake. The next card is a card I'm truly excited for. That card is the one and only Machamp. For those of you who don't know, Machamp is my favorite Pokemon, so having a playable one is really exciting for me. I don't think this card will get as much hype as the recently announced Pokken Fighters, but I am certainly hyped for it. I'm also hyped for Pokken Fighters, but just a little bit less. Its ability makes all your fighting Pokemon do 20 more damage. Whoa, 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 hold the phone. So fighting gets another damage boost in the form of an ability? Man, how could fighting types get any better? Well, Machamp isn't quite as powerful as Strong Energy in Fighting Stadium. For starters, it's a Stage 2, which takes up a lot of space in your deck. It also makes the deck weaker against Garbodor, and some fighting decks play Garbodor, so playing Machamp makes your mirror match a lot worse. But against those decks that don't rely on abilities, Machamp can really rack up your damage and make your fighting types true powerhouses. What do I care if it's good or not? It's freaking Machamp! I'll play it no matter how good it actually is, just to say I played Machamp in a deck. Our final regular Pokemon we're looking at is Eevee. Yeah, Eevee. Not any of its evolutions. No, they all suck. But Eevee's got a great ability for any evolution deck. Its ability says if you attach a basic energy to Eevee, you can search your deck for an evolution of that type and evolve Eevee. Turn 1 evolution's pretty cool, and not something we've really had in a long time. As I said earlier, the evolutions in this set are really bad. But imagine turn 1 evolving your Eevee into one of the Plasma evolutions and chorus machining onto it. You could get a turn 1 Vaporeon, or Flareon, or Espeon, or Leafeon, or Jolteon, or even give them more HP with Umbreon. All of these guys are very scary when you hit the right things for weakness. And on the first turn, too. Due to these evolutions' HP being really low, and their damage not being very high without weakness, this deck may not be all that strong. But doing all this crazy stuff turn 1 is a fun thing to think about. Time to move on to the trainers. Sadly, there aren't too many great trainers in this set, besides Fighting Stadium and Karina, but there are some worth looking at. First up is Focus Sash. This is another card for fighting types, but it's not nearly as good as the rest, which is why I'm talking about it here and not with the other legit cards. It's a tool that when attached to a fighting Pokemon that's at full HP, and that Pokemon gets knocked out, you discard Focus Sash and the Pokemon stays alive at 10 HP. Honestly, not that many things do enough damage to one-shot anymore, and things that do almost always play Megaphone, which totally counters Focus Sash. This might work better with fighting types with lower HP that also don't need Muscle Band as much, maybe Tyrantrum? But with the giant HP EXs like Landorus and Lucario, I don't think it'll be all that great. Next is Sparkling Robe. It's another tool, and this one says the Pokemon this card is attached to can't be affected by special conditions. I feel like this card has some big potential. A lot of decks that play lasers aren't the kind of decks to play Megaphone, so Sparkling Robe is an easy way to avoid lasers without having to play Virizion and Grass Energy. The issue, of course, is you can't also attach Muscle Band to any of your Pokemon with Sparkling Robe, which is a general flaw with most tools nowadays. Counter Stadiums and Switch are other cards that are really good against lasers, and while those cards aren't quite as good against them as Sparkling Robe is, those cards are easily compatible with Muscle Band. Because of the Muscle Band issue, I'm not sure Sparkling Robe will see heavy play, but it seems like the optimal tool to play when your deck doesn't rely on Muscle Band. The next card we're looking at seems to be a pretty good one. That card is Training Center. This is a stadium that gives all Stage 1 and 2s plus 30 HP. Holy what? That is a lot of HP for just a stadium. But we have to remember that being a stadium, it can be countered and all the Pokemon that need that extra HP to survive will die. This can be prevented by using Max Potion, and you can decrease the odds of it happening by playing Heavy Training Center, but the issue will always be there. It's not even that bad if one of your evolutions dies from the stadium being countered. It kept your evolution in play for another turn, which can be really nice a lot of the time. Training Center seems very solid for evolution decks, especially now that they don't have Tropical Beach. The third stadium in this set isn't quite as good as the other two, but it has some uses. That card is Mountain Ring. This stadium prevents all damage done to bench Pokemon. While normally Mr. Mime would be better, Mountain Ring does work better in certain situations. For one, Garbodor doesn't stop Mountain Ring, and Landorus does often play Garbodor. It also counters stadiums, which is a nice touch and very useful against certain decks. Decks that need a counter stadium should definitely look into playing this card. But if you already have a counter stadium, I'd stick to Mr. Mime. Next up is a reprint of a card we've been seriously lacking for a couple formats now. If only it wasn't so luck-based and stupid. That card is Super Scoop Up. Again, this card is luck-based and probably not a good thing for the game, but there are some cards that will severely benefit from it. It's also just a nice card to both heal and switch one of your Pokemon. I don't see a reason why this card won't see as much play as it has in the past. Before getting into the EXs in this set, we have another special energy to look at, and this one's very similar to Strong Energy. This one's called Herbal Energy, which can only be attached to grass types. This one, when attached, heals 30 damage from the Pokemon you attached it to. This energy would be very nice, as not that many decks one-shot anymore, but the most popular grass deck, Virizion, would much prefer to have more basic grass energy to Emerald Slash as opposed to special energy. Especially with Super Rod gone, you're more limited to how many grass energy you have per game. And really, what grass decks are there that don't play Virizion? Well, if you can find one, Herbal Energy should be great for that deck. Alright, enough of these trainers. It's time to talk about the EXs in this set. As usual, the first EX in this set is pretty bad. And if there's one word to describe Hawlucha EX, it's bad. Okay, there are worse EXs than Hawlucha, but it's definitely not a great card. For starters, it's only got 130 HP, which is very disheartening. It's still easily one-shot by most decks in the format. Its ability is... Rocky Helmet. Not at all what I was hoping it'd be. Its attack does 60 for a fighting and 2 colorless, and if you have a stadium in play, it does 40 more. Supposedly, if you draw Muscle Band, Strong Energy, Double Colorless, and Fighting Stadium, you can deal 160, then counterattack will finish them off. But that's a lot of stuff you have to hit, and of course, if they don't attack you with that Pokemon, that strategy doesn't even work. Especially with the fighting deck, devoting that many resources to one 130 HP EX can lose you the game a lot of the time. In theory it seems kinda strong, but in practice... meh. Next up, we've got Heracross EX, and its Mega Form, Heracross EX. Heracross's attacks are okay at best. The first one costs 1 Grass and 1 Colorless, and deals 40, and during your opponent's next turn, you reduce all damage done to Heracross by 20. Its second attack costs an extra Grass, and does 80 damage, plus 40 if you decide to deal 20 to Heracross. Again, the attacks are okay, but nothing too strong. As for the Mega, it's very powerful, but it has a few issues. The attack is called Big Bang Horn, which deals 180 for Grass Colorless, but it does 10 less damage for each damage counter on itself. The easiest way to keep it at full health is with either Aromatisse or Dusknoir Flashfire. Unlike Kangaskhan though, Heracross one-shots stuff very consistently. But Heracross has a couple crippling issues that Kangaskhan doesn't. For one, its energy cost is a lot worse, so powering it up is much less of a possibility. It's also got a fire weakness, so Pyroar straight up owns it. It's also only got 220 HP as opposed to 230, so a Mega Cannon plus 20 damage from G-Booster knocks it out. Maybe Herbal Energy or Hard Charm could fix these problems, but that's more cards you have to add to an already tight deck. This card seems like it could be pretty threatening, but at the sad price of inconsistency. The next card is Dragonite EX. This one's got a pretty sweet ability in the form of Bust In, which says when you bench Dragonite, you can move any number of basic energy on your field to Dragonite, then switch it with your active Pokemon. This ability is pretty sweet for a lot of reasons. You basically get a free fairy transfer without having to set up a Stage 1. Only issue is you have to bench a Dragonite to use it, so you only have a limited number of uses of it. Thankfully, Super Scoop Up, Cassius, and Scoop Up Cyclone can allow you to use the ability more than 4 times. So if you keep scooping up Dragonites, you can keep healing them and keep them alive for, well, forever. The only issues here are the ones you can expect. Things that one-shot Dragonite and Garbodor. Garbodor you can deal with, since Dragonite can fairly easily kill it with Lysander. But decks like Genesect, Yveltal, Aromatisse, Plasma, and fighting decks with Machamp will be able to one-shot Dragonite. And having only 1 or 2 Dragonites being one-shot is enough for this deck to outright lose. But those decks that can't one-shot Dragonite will find it really scary. Its attack is solid. For 2 Grass and a Lightning, it does 80, plus 40 if you discard an energy on itself. Gee, that attack doesn't sound familiar. They sure aren't running out of ideas for cards anytime soon. It's nice because it can be powered up by Emerald Slash. Overall, Dragonite seems like a solid card that has some nice, solid matchups. If only it didn't also have some really bad matchups too. And for our final card, we have another very strong EX, almost as legit as all the other fighting cards we talked about at the beginning. That card is Seismitoad EX. Its first attack is the more legit of the two. For 2 Carless, Quaking Punch does 30, and your opponent can't play items? What? Are you really doing this, Pokemon? Turn 1 item lock? Oh boy, this sure looks like a fun format we're in for. Turn 1 item lock is annoying, and boring, and generally not fun. We also have to remember that Muscle Band, Laser, and Burbank can be added onto this attack. So this weak little attack with an incredible secondary effect can now do 80 damage, which can rack up even faster since they can't play Switch to get out of the poison. This card combos even better with Garbodor. Getting rid of both items and abilities is an obvious and pretty gross combo if you ask me. They can't even play Megaphone to get their abilities back. The only solace in this card is its weakness to grass, so Virizion absolutely annihilates it. Not just because of the weakness, but also because of the water resistance and immunity to lasers. Seismitoad's also got a second attack, which actually isn't as bad as it looks. For 2 water and a Carless, it has Grenade Hammer. What even is that? A hammer with grenades at the end? A grenade that fires hammers? It does 130 damage, but 2 of your bench Pokemon take 30. The side effect is pretty harsh, but to finish off the game, or threaten a win, it's not bad. Seismitoad is by far one of the scariest and most legit cards in this set, and something a lot of players won't enjoy facing. So, are you tired of me saying legit yet?
And that's gonna be it for today's episode. Hope you all enjoyed. I didn't quite get to all the cards I really wanted to talk about, but the episode was getting kind of long, and I really talked about all the super playable ones that I really wanted to discuss. My next video will most likely be a card of the day, actually on one of the cards I talked about in this set, so let's see if you guys can figure out what card that is. After that, I have another mix-up video planned, again, on another deck idea I talked about in this video that's coming out of this set, so stay tuned for that. I think I really did test this deck, and I really think I'm excited to talk to you guys about it and share my opinions, because they're not exactly popular opinions, and I think this will be an interesting episode for you guys to watch, so stay tuned for that. You know, the month or 2 it takes me to make another episode of this series. Make sure to leave me a comment telling me what you thought of the video, or just give me a thumbs up or down to save you some time. Other than that, thank you guys for watching. I really appreciate all you guys for watching and getting my videos more views. I've noticed my views and watch times have been increasing, so thank you guys for that. You guys really are great fans. I really appreciate that. So thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Later.